Good evening, everyone. I'm Billy. I'm an alcoholic. Welcome. Monday night service manual study. We will open with the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Quick announcement, because I got a good question from somebody this week by email, so I'll answer it for everybody. The current service manual, if you go through it, has, I want to say, is it 12 chapters? Is the Grapevine chapter 12? The Grapevine is chapter 12, correct. And then it goes into a glossary. And then it goes into maps and a whole bunch of appendixes, like to W, which is 3 short than the 26, whatever. So the answer is yes, we are going to go through the appendixes. We will stick to a chapter at a time until we get to the appendixes. When we get to the appendixes, depending on which one it is, we'll see how many we can get done in a week. The ones that are like the bylaws of the General Service Board, AA Grapevine, and AAWS, maybe we can get them done in a week. But it might be just, we might have to, that could take 2. The conference charter, both the original and the current, will be its own week. And then from there, we'll take the smaller appendixes as they come, maybe do 3 or 4 a week, something like that. But it was a good question. Tonight, we are on chapter 8, the General Service Board. We are back to being in order. It says at the top of that page, the General Service Board, the trustees, is the chief service arm of the conference and is essentially custodial in character, accepting for decisions upon matters of policy, finance, or AA tradition liable to seriously affect AA as a whole. The General Service Board has entire freedom of action in routine conduct of the policy and business affairs of AA service corporations. So they have entire freedom except for matters of policy, finance, or AA tradition liable to seriously affect AA as a whole. So for those that don't know, or if you're new to this, whatever, I am a past trustee. I was a trustee from years 2013 to 2017. I was a general service trustee, but we'll go through that tonight. It does have the mission, vision, action statement of the General Service Board. All of those things come right from the conference charter. The mission is to serve Alcoholics Anonymous. The vision is to provide clear and effective leadership to the fellowship. We are directly responsible and responsive to the fellowship through the General Service Conference. We are concerned with all matters affecting the fellowship's primary purpose of carrying the AA message to the still suffering alcoholic. And then it says action. In all our deliberations and decisions, we will be guided by and uphold the 12 steps, 12 traditions, and 12 concepts. And when we get to the conference charter and then to the bylaws of the General Service Board, you'll see that Bernard Smith was a genius because he helped Bill originally write all this stuff. And the steps, traditions, and concepts are spiritual principles. However, they are written into the bylaws of the General Service Board, which is a legal document. So the 21 trustees, that document that says how they operate, you can't just ever say, well, the trustees can do whatever they want legally because the traditions, concepts, and steps are only spiritual until they put them into the document that's legal. So when you're a trustee, You have to uphold him. That's why it says in all our deliberations and decisions, we're guided by and uphold the 12 traditions, 12 steps, and 12 concepts. It goes on to say they act as the principal planners and administrators, basically concept 8. It says they serve as the custodians of the 2 affiliate corporations, AA Grapevine and AAWS. It says they oversee and adjusting when needed a sound, wide-reaching public relations policy that is inclusive of all who may be of help in raising awareness of the fellowship's existence to all who may benefit from it. It says communicating and maintaining relationships with the general service structures throughout the world, providing support to help ensure the growth and welfare of the fellowship worldwide. And it says they act as the guardians of the AA steps, traditions, and concepts. It goes on to talk about considerations for, like, if you're thinking about being a trustee. And I want to get that point across to everybody. When I got elected an alternate GSR, I still smoked 2 packs of Newports a day. I barely had money for a slice of pizza and a pack of cigarettes every day. I was always on time for sober softball, but maybe not a lot of other things. Anybody here has the possibility to be a trustee someday, or a director on one of our corporations, or a delegate. It says the conference asks prospective candidates to carefully consider how much time they have available for AA service as a trustee. They must be available for quarterly board meetings held in New York, the week-long General Service Conference in April, regular communication throughout the year with colleagues on the board, members of the fellowship, and GSO staff, participation in other matters that require attention between regularly scheduled meetings, when asked, attending regional forums and local AA events, and you might be asked to serve on one of the affiliate corporate boards. So you won't only be on the General Service Board, you might be on the AWS board or the Grapevine board. And then it says there are additional responsibilities. And, a couple of things I want to say about that. Someone just, one person's, resentment is another person's amends, right? That's just as easy as I can say it in AA. I had said something somewhere, somebody took it the wrong way. They let me know recently. It happens. But the time commitment, it is a personal pet peeve of mine when people are standing for an AA position and they either include their personal wealth or that they're retired as part of why they should be elected, because I don't think those two have anything to do with being elected. And I think it is very unfair to people who are not in the same economic condition or younger people who are not retired. I was a full-time executive when I became a trustee, when I became a director as well. Is it a lot of time? Yes. I served 8 years. 8 years is 4 years as a non-trustee director and 4 years as a trustee on the General Service Board and also a director on the AWS board. Over those 8 years, I want to say 152 vacation days over that time. But you need time to travel. You need time to be there. Board weekends. If you have not heard this before, the board uses the real active alcoholic definition of a weekend. It starts on like Wednesday night or Thursday and goes till Monday. It is not the regular, normal Saturday and Sunday weekend of the regular world. It is a complete alcoholic drunk weekend schedule of like Thursday to Monday. But I've learned through service, you can learn time management. I just don't want to talk people out of standing for these positions. The next thing it talks about is the composition. And we'll get to it when we get to the bylaws. But one of the things it says is the board of trustees today consists of 21 people. It's actually going to be 22 very soon. It's 21 people when the chair of the board is a Class A trustee. When the chair of the board is a Class A trustee, we only seat 6 other Class A trustees. And the reason for that is to keep the ratio of 2/3, 1/3. 2/3 alcoholic, 1/3 non-alcoholic. So 14-7. In the instance where we elect an alcoholic chair, we can have a regular person serve as a non-Class A trustee, as a 7th Class A trustee. But then it means we have 22 trustees, and the bylaws give that provision. Last year, we elected a Class B chair of the General Service Board. He was actually on here a few weeks ago, Scott H. The last Class A chair, that spot was vacant. So the board is going to fill it with a 7th trustee, a Class A. So we will have 22. It says there's a careful balance on the board between trustees who are elected primarily to bring regional and AA service experience to the board, and those primarily for business or other professional backgrounds. So there's really only one kind of Class A trustee, a Class A trustee. Chair of the board is a separate position. But there are 3 kinds of alcoholic trustees. Those are Class B. Again, for those that are new, we have a little phrase we use. A is for amateur, B is for boozer. It's an easy way to remember it, right? Class A, non-alcoholic amateur. Class B, member of AA, alcoholic boozer. But there's 3 types of Class Bs that we're going to go through tonight. There are regional trustees. There's 8 of them, 6 in the United States and 2 in Canada. There's the Northeast, Southeast, East Central, West Central, Southwest, Pacific regions in the United States, and Eastern and Western Canada. So those are the 8 regions. And then we have trustees at large. We have 2 of them, one for the United States and one for Canada. Then we have what I was. I'm a general service trustee. Now, in this paragraph that I read you, where it says, there is a balance of the board between trustees who are elected primarily to bring regional and AA service experience to the board, and those selected primarily for business or professional background. It doesn't mean you only bring one of those things to the board if you're a Class B trustee. I'll give an example. Regional trustees may primarily get elected for their AA service experience and to bring regional experience to the board. But plenty of regional trustees also have business or professional experience. Some don't, but plenty do. The trustees at large, they're primarily there to bring not a region, but a national flavor for the United States or Canada to the board and AA service experience. But some of them also have professional and business experience. Scott was a trustee at large Canada, but he was a lawyer. So he brought a professional skill set to the board. And then when you look at the 4 general service trustees, they're primarily selected for their business and professional experience. You also have to have some AA experience. Not all of them have been past delegates. I was a past delegate, so I had significant AA service experience, but I was brought on the board for my professional and business experience, along with the secondary factor of my AA service experience. Class A trustees, the 7 who we call Friends of AA, are selected primarily for their professional experience and familiarity with AA and its program of recovery. They are a rich source of wisdom and perspective And since they need not maintain anonymity, they are available to speak in public on behalf of AA. If you saw any of the local news shows in Canada, in Vancouver, during the international convention, some of our Class A trustees were on the morning talk shows, and they can show their face, they can show their last name because they're non-alcoholic. Now, there is a little urban myth or bad information out there. It is impossible for a non-alcoholic to be a member of AA, and that applies to Class A trustees. I've heard somewhere somebody said, oh, Class A trustees for the time they're on the board are members of AA. That is not correct. Where that comes from is the bylaws of the General Service Board that says in the New York State legal term, they're a member of the General Service Board of Alcoholics Anonymous, Inc. Let me just see if this question is. Given the verbiage in the conference charter concerning the responsibilities of the board, why was it anyone's business outside the General Service Board about how the board conducts its own affairs, including, for example, the removal of the chair of the board? Surely that is the business of the board alone in its own capacity, given its defined responsibilities. That's a very good question. I'll answer it the best I can. For those that don't know, a couple of years ago, the chair resigned, was asked to resign. Who cares? It's 3 or 4 years ago now. But why was the fellowship concerned, or more specifically, delegates, the conference? Well, number one, being the chair of the board is not the board's decision. The board only recommends somebody to the conference, and the conference has to elect the chair of the board. That's number one. At the conference each year, the officers of the General Service Board are approved by the conference. So for that reason, it's not only the business of the board. The other reason probably is that if you go on a search, a massive search for a chair of the board of all past trustees, and you have interviews and more interviews, and then you get down to a finalist of 2 or 3 people, and then you have more interviews for those finalists with the full board, and then you have a third legacy vote by the board, and then the board takes the winner of that third legacy vote and recommends that person to the conference. One would say listen, it doesn't matter whether you loved that chair of the board, didn't like that chair of the board, it doesn't matter anything. But from an organizational point of view, if you spend that much time looking for a person and a year later they're gone, that might not talk about the person at all. It could talk about us. So that's why so many conference members were felt that they had to give their opinion or write letters or bring it up at the board. The other thing I would say, and in full respect to the board, I did not sign the past trustee letter that's become famous. A lot of past trustees signed it. I did not. And in full disclosure, I served with that Class A trustee when I was a delegate, that chair. I just didn't want any part of it. But now when I look back at it, there's probably 2 things that occurred that caused a lot of the disruption. And I say that with total respect to the members of the board that were there at the time, some of them are good friends of mine, and I respect all of them for serving as trustees. But there's 2 things that probably happened that caused a lot of this. And sometimes I don't think we go back and look at things and maybe say, wow, we could do that better the next time. The first is, imagine you're at your local assembly and somebody in that meeting brings up getting rid of the delegate or getting rid of the area chair. I know what I would say if I was at that assembly. I would say, maybe you should let cool heads prevail. Maybe put it off till the next assembly so that everyone can think about it and everyone's not so emotional. So the first thing I would be concerned about is something coming up in a meeting and taking such a decisive action so quickly. That's my view of it. The second thing I would bring up, and this is like AA 101, which we never learn, and we are so bad at on all levels of AA, is about 7 or 8 weeks after the chair resigned or was asked to resign, there was finally a meeting on Zoom between the board and all the delegates. Now, I don't know about your little corner of the world, but I'm just going to tell you my experience. 8 minutes of something festering in AA will blow up into gossip and bad information. 8 days is an eternity in Alcoholics Anonymous of no information. And 8 weeks, we might as well solve if there was a second, shooter at John F. Kennedy, right? Like 8 weeks. Do you know how much stuff can be imagined in 8 weeks? I think looking back at that now, and I've said this to some of my friends who are on the board, I said, I hope if this happens again, that every night that week it happens, the board opens up a Zoom channel for delegates and has that conversation right away. Because I wonder if that meeting and conversation had happened like the Wednesday of that week, couldn't a lot of this have been avoided? And I'm just basing it on mistakes I've made in AA service and in my own professional career. Like sometimes in AA, like the outside world, we become consumed with crafting the perfect narrative. And so I want to let everyone know that in AA, there's no such thing as a perfect narrative. It's always sloppy and dirty, and there's always three sides to every story. There's no perfect narrative. But the damage done by delaying communication in order to craft the perfect message is not worth it, ever. Not at a group level, not at a district level, not at an area level. It's just not worth it. So I hope the person who asked that question, I hope that helps you. I hope that we're long past that. I know there's still some resentments out there. Hopefully, you know, they have a pen and a piece of paper and maybe a ruler to draw some rows and some columns, and they can open up the book that we have and they can work their way through that resentment, whether they were for the chair going or against the chair going. If it's still taking up time in your head. So I hope that answers that question. The non-alcoholic trustees, it says in seeking Class A trustees, the board looks for people who have one, a proven track record, two, a demonstrated interest in Alcoholics Anonymous, three, experience in working with AA and its members, four, leadership skills, and five, time to fulfill. The term period for a Class A trustee, the spiritual term period is 6 years. The legal term period is 2 3-year terms. That's what it says in the bylaws. And of course, legally, they need to be reelected to the board every year when the board votes on the slate. When you look at Class A trustees, their experience with AA, it's always one or the other, or both. Either in their professional life, they have had interaction with Alcoholics Anonymous or its members, or two, they have a family member who's in AA or was helped by AA or maybe in Al-Anon. I know two past treasurers of the board who were both finance professionals. They had no professional interaction with AA, but both of them had sons who got sober, who were young boys who came to AA and got sober. One of them, I know another treasurer of the board whose wife was sober. So they have an immense gratitude for Alcoholics Anonymous. If you look at the type of Class A trustees we get, they always fall in a couple of buckets. We're big on judges. We're big on wardens. We're big on probation and parole officers. We're big on social workers. We're big on psychiatrists and psychologists. We're big on social workers. And we're big on clergy. And when you think about it, I mean, people like you and I, those four people deal with people like us all the time. People say, why do we have clergy on the board? Come on. Do you know how many people go to their rabbi or their priest or minister, or a family member goes because they don't trust anybody else and that's who they're going to talk to? Now, we don't even have to go down the line of judges, parole officers, wardens, and probation officers. I mean, we basically keep them in business. We're a good part of their economy. Every once in a while, we get an outlier. I hear a lot of talk, which is probably good, about how we probably need someone from somewhere like Silicon Valley who's like a leader in the IT world. Probably true. And then always the finance world, especially because of the treasurer position. I will tell you this, Class A's are no different than us. Sometimes people, they want to hold Class A trustees up to be like these exalted, like super spiritual people. Most Class A trustees would tell you that is absolutely not true. They're as human as the alcoholic. They just don't have the obsession and the physical allergy. But it is good sometimes to have an outside perspective, because people in AA service are so convinced usually of their way of looking at something. And so sometimes it's good to have an outside view of looking at something regarding literature or from the board. So that's Class A trustees. Regional trustees. It says these trustees are selected for their service experience and familiarity with AA principles. And then an important line: while no trustee can be said to represent a geographical section, all trustees only represent the fellowship as a whole. Regional trustees bring to the board's discussions a regional AA point of view and experience that is invaluable. Qualifications. The conference feels that 10 years of continued sobriety is right for regional trustees, a minimum, not mandatory. Having leadership experience enables a member to deal with AA growth and affairs with grace and a minimum of friction. Good leaders can bring to the board the quality of resoluteness and the courage of their own convictions, along with good judgment, objectivity, and the willingness to stand up and express themselves. Such candidates are typically well suited to represent the board and interpret its actions back home. While a background with business or other professional experience is helpful, the board is also interested in other strengths that regional trustees can bring. So I want to make that clear. We've had regional trustees of all perspectives, including a bank robber, okay? So you do not need to be a business professional. We should ask everybody who's qualified. I don't care if you're a stay-at-home husband or wife. I don't care if you are a banker. I don't care if you're a maintenance person. It should not matter. Like, what should matter is, do you meet these qualifications? And if you do, then submit. Duties and responsibilities. In addition to the duties listed for all trustees near the beginning of this chapter, regional trustees serve on the board of directors of either AAWS or AA Grapevine for 2 years, normally in their second and third year of service as a trustee. So let me explain that because it gets lost in translation a lot. A regional trustee serves for 4 years. It is important to tell you right now that per the bylaws, it doesn't matter what the conference does and it doesn't matter what the board does. You cannot extend a Class B trustee's term of service. It is prohibited by the bylaws. That's because we believe in really effective rotation at the board level. In the time of an emergency or an urgent need, a Class A trustee can be asked to serve 1 additional year by the board. That is possible. But Class B regional trustees serve for 4 years. So their first year and their 4th year, they are a member of the General Service Board of Alcoholics Anonymous, the board of trustees that meets 4 times a year. But year 2 and year 3, each regional trustee serves on either the AAWS board or the AA Grapevine board. So that means they now have 8 extra meetings a year to go to. 4 of them, they're already in New York for the General Service Board meetings because they're the same weekend. But there are other standalone meetings that they now need to go to New York for. That's years 2 and 3 for a regional. It says each regional trustee serves 4 successive 1-year terms. That means the conference elects you for 4, but you do need to be legally elected. It is 4 1-year terms. Openings for new regional trustees, we could say what years they're going to be, but then we could have somebody get sick and die, and then that could change. But usually about 2 or 3 a year. How do we get people? Well, an announcement goes out to all delegates in that region that at the next general service conference, like if you are an area, I want to say the Pacific region this year, I know the Pacific region for sure, is in its last year of its regional trustee. So in the Pacific region this fall at election assemblies or non-election assemblies, that area will have to have an election to find a candidate to be a regional trustee. Each area is only allowed to put forward 1 candidate. So if more than 1 person stands, there will be a 3rd legacy election. You do not have to be a past delegate to be a regional trustee. However, there hasn't been a non-past delegate regional trustee since like the 60s. That election, once it happens, the current delegate will give that candidate a trustee resume form. That candidate will fill it out, will send it back to the delegate. The delegate will then send it in to the general service office. Has to be before January 1st. And then they will be on the ballot to be a regional trustee at the conference. How are they elected? That's a good question. At the General Service Conference, usually on Wednesday afternoon, but not in stone, but usually, there will be trustee elections. For a regional trustee, they will rope off a section in the front for just delegates from that region. So all the delegates from that region will get a vote. And then who also gets a vote is an equal number of members from the trustees nominating committee and the conference committee on trustees. So if there's 14 areas in your region, they will select 7 members of the trustees nominating committee and 7 members of the conference committee on trustees out of a hat to go into that roped area and participate in the election. Each delegate is given 2 minutes to present their candidate to the voters. And then they are each, the voters are given time to ask questions of any of the presenters. After that is over, it goes immediately to a third legacy vote, just like at your home assembly. The winner of that third legacy vote becomes the next regional trustee. That's how that works. Let's see, because this chapter is long. I'm going to go to general service trustees. There are 4 general service trustees. The general service trustees are AA members who serve on the respective boards of AAWS and the Grapevine. They are available at any time for the solution of problems on which GSO or Grapevine staff members need help. Traditionally, they have been selected for their business or professional backgrounds in order to provide the boards with particular expertise that may be needed or requested by each of the corporate boards. So a general service trustee, for all 4 years of being a trustee, unlike a regional where it's just years 2 and 3, a general service trustee is on both the general service board and one of the other boards, AAWS or Grapevine, for all 4 years of being a trustee. And in order to be a general service trustee, you have to have been a non-trustee director on AAWS or AA Grapevine for at least 1 year. I served 4. That's the maximum you can serve. It says leadership skills are good qualifications, 7 years of continuous sobriety. General service trustees deal with the business affairs of these 2 corporate boards, so a background in business or other professional experience has been found to be essential. Many general service trustees have experience in publishing, technology, public relations, finance, administration, or other similar fields. Duties and responsibilities. In addition to the responsibilities of every trustee outlined above, general service trustees must be available for all meetings of their respective corporate board and for consultation with GSO or Grapevine staff members at any time. Little history fact, prior to 1990 or 89, we called general service trustees in-town trustees. At that time, you had to live like within a short driving distance of a couple of hours of New York City to be an in-town trustee. That was changed at the end of the 80s. The term of service, like a regional trustee, is 4 one-year terms. How do they find general service trustees? Because the process is different. There is an announcement in box 459. There is an announcement now on the meeting guide app. Every delegate, trustee, director, appointed committee member, and past trustee are sent the announcement to get it out as wide as possible. One of the biggest mistakes with non-trustee directors is that sometimes in certain areas, they only share it with past delegates. But we've had great, outstanding non-trustee directors who later became general service trustees who were not past delegates. Is there a little bit of a learning curve sometimes with? Yes, but we've had some great ones. So you fill out that resume and you do not send it to your delegate. You send it to the trustees nominating committee. And most times it's coming from the corporate board who are recommending one of their non-trustee directors or past non-trustee directors to be a general service trustee. The nominating committee of each board, AWS or the Grapevine, will interview people, and then they will come up with one candidate's name to be the general service trustee candidate from that corporate board. And then that goes to trustees nominating. It's not finished. Then trustees nominating has to approve who the corporate board selected, because besides being on that corporate board, the person is going to be a trustee on the general service board. Once it leaves the trustees nominating committee, the whole board has to approve that person being selected. And then that person goes on the slate at the conference. So a lot of times you hear about this slate thing. What is the slate? So for regional trustees and at-large trustees, we actually have elections at the conference that the delegates participate in. For general service trustees and Class A trustees, we don't. The board selects somebody and then puts their name on the slate of trustees for the conference to approve. And Class A trustees are found the same way. Class A trustees, they'll send their resume in, or maybe a friend will send it in, or a delegate. The trustees nominating committee will review all the resumes sent in and give them a score. And the trustees nominating committee will get together and decide who are their finalists. It's usually around 5 people they'll select. And they will interview, maybe even 7. And they will come up with 2 or 3 finalists. And for Class A's, we do something different. We bring those finalists to the January board weekend. And the trustees nominating committee will interview them in person to follow up the Zoom initial interview. And then we let those finalists attend the board weekend. Go to all the meetings, all the trustee committee meetings, all the board meetings, anything except that's confidential, so that they can be exposed to what does a board weekend look like. The trustees nominating committee will then have a third legacy vote and decide who is their final candidate. And they will send that name to the general service board for them to approve. And then they send it to the conference on the slate. So that's general service trustees and Class A trustees. Trustees at large, again, you don't have to be a past delegate. There's 2 of them, one for the United States and one for Canada. An announcement goes out to every area. Each area is allowed to provide 1 candidate. If you happen to be an area or a region where the trustee at large is up at the same time as regional, you are not permitted to stand for both. You have to pick. You could stand for both inside your area. In other words, you could say Susie P could stand for regional, and if she didn't get regional, she could stand for at large. But Susie P can't be the candidate for both. Can only be a candidate for one or the other. Those resumes are filled out by the candidate that's selected by the area by third legacy vote. They are sent in to the conference desk, the nominating desk. This is where it's a little different than regional. There is we have a lot of dinners and lunches at the General Service Conference. We have past delegate dinner. We have the delegates only dinner. We have the AWS dinner, the Grapevine dinner. We have the General Service Board dinner where we have rotation talks after that are different than the rotation talks on Saturday. Then we also have regional lunches. So on Wednesday afternoon, there is a regional lunch before the trustee elections. And in years of a trustee at large election, each delegate inside that regional lunch will present their candidate from their area to be a trustee at large. The delegates at the regional lunch will listen to each delegate's candidate, and then we'll have a third legacy vote. and they will come up with one candidate from their region. So one from the Northeast, one from the Southeast, one from the Pacific. Except for Canada, because there's only 2 regions, we allow 4 people. But once they're selected out of their region, on Wednesday afternoon, all the delegates from that country are segregated in a particular part of the conference floor with the trustees nominating committee and the conference committee on trustees. And then a third legacy election is held, and whoever the winner is becomes the next trustee at large, Canada or US. Trustee at large's duties and responsibilities. They're members of the trustees international committee. Now, they're on some other committees, but they're always a member of the international committee. Just like the treasurer is always a member of the finance committee. And the chair of AAWS and the chair of AA Grapevine is always a member of the nominating committee. They also represent the US and Canada as delegates to the World Service Meeting, which is held every 2 years. If you're not familiar with the World Service Meeting, it happens every 2 years. Every 4 years, it's in the US or Canada. So it'll go US and Canada, 2 years later, somewhere else in the world. Then US and Canada, 2 years later, somewhere else in the world. They are expected to attend regional forums in both the US and Canada. If schedules permit, each trustee at large could attend one regional forum in each of the 8 regions. So here, this is a mistake where they say each of the 8 North American regions. We don't have North American regions because we don't have a North American service structure. Each of the United States and Canada, 8 regions. Mexico, if you want to Google it, you can check me, is part of North America. Mexico is not Central America geographically. They also go to invitations to celebrations when countries are celebrating 50 years or 80 years with AA. They also go to zonal meetings, regional meetings. For us, we go to what we call the Rodella, which is the meeting of the Americas, but Rodella is the acronym for that acronym in Spanish. They can be appointed to serve on AAWS or the Grapevine if there is an opening, like if someone gets sick or someone passes away, or if a regional can't do it. The term of service is just like general service and regional Class Bs. It's 4 years, 4 one-year terms. I think I'm going to stop there. We will resume at chair of the General Service Board. So we'll call this part 1 of the General Service Board, and we will go to questions. So please send in your questions. I will give a couple of minutes for questions. Okay. How common or uncommon is it for a trustee to not serve out their term? Great question. I do not want to get in trouble for this answer. So it is very uncommon for a trustee to not finish their term. There have been people who've gotten sick, but usually they don't resign from the board. There have been deaths while serving as a trustee. I think the person is asking the question because over the last 4 years or so, between the General Service Board the AAWS board and the AA Grapevine board, there have been like 6 people who have left before their term was over. For the interest of this recording and everything else, we had the chair of the General Service Board resign. 2 months later, or around that time, a general service trustee serving on the Grapevine board resigned. We had last year a non-trustee director on the Grapevine board resign before their term was over. This year, we had 2 Class A trustees who decided not to go on after their first 3-year term. That is not normal. So it is fair to say, over the last couple of years, there has been an unusual amount of resignations. That's for the board to look at and figure out why, not me. But the question is it uncommon? Yes. Prior to that, prior to the 6 in the last couple of years, the last trustee that resigned for anything other than health or death was like 2003. Was a long, long time ago. So it's uncommon. Mexico is not or is part of US Canada. Okay. Geography, world map. North America includes Canada, United States, and Mexico. In Alcoholics Anonymous service structures, our structure is the United States and Canada. We do not call it the North American structure because it's only the United States and Canada. Mexico has their own service structure. Actually, they have 2. That's a whole other topic for 5 hours. But Mexico has its own service structure. Does it happen that a recommendation for a trustee position is not approved by the General Service Conference? There's big debate on this topic. I come at it from a point of view that the conference's job is not to rubber stamp. That we don't make the conference vote on something unless it's a large matter of policy, finance, or tradition. So if you ask the conference to approve who you've selected as a trustee, then the way I read the conference charter and the concepts, they could not approve the slate. There is further debate as to whether the conference has the ability to remove somebody from the slate. In other words, somebody is selected as a trustee and the conference says, I like 20 of them, but not the 21st. So I want to make a motion to remove somebody for consideration. Again, I know that some people chairing the General Service Conference have said that that's improper. I can't find it in the charter or the bylaws or the concepts that a voting member of the General Service Conference could not make a motion to amend a recommendation and remove a name. But at the end of the day, the slates have to be approved by the conference. Can someone who has been a regional trustee can come back and later be nominated for a different trustee, like trustee at large? Or can you only be a trustee of any kind once? Great question. I cannot be a trustee at large or a regional trustee. I'm allowed 4 years as a trustee, Class B. I can come back as a chair of the board. That's it. A separate 4-year term as a chair. But you can only be one kind of alcoholic trustee once. Any other questions? Okay. Like I said, please, if you want to read again where it starts with chair of the general service board and the officer positions and the treasurer, and all the trustee committees we will cover next week. Somebody said, see that, I'm going to actually mention this. Somebody said, thanks for hosting despite Monday Night Football. Good call. But what I would share with you is two things. The first thing is that it's why I always tell people when people say, because he knows the Jets are playing tonight, whoever asked that question. When people say that AA service is politics or anything else, no, it feels like commitment. When your favorite team is on, when something you would rather be doing is going on, it feels like commitment. Now, what I would also share with you is that, if you are a Jet fan and used to being disappointed every weekend for your whole life, it's a constant source of spiritual progress and growth. So, delaying watching that game has probably been great for me, to be perfectly honest. So, thanks everyone. We will close with the responsibility statement. I am responsible when anyone anywhere reaches out for help. I want the hand of AA to always be there, and for that I am responsible. Thanks everyone. Have a good night.